All right, welcome back. Today we're going to jump into a video on the Pints with Aquinas YouTube channel, and he is interviewing Dr. John Bergsma, and he's explaining in this video, there's a lot of topics that they go through, and I'll put the link in the description as far as the whole conversation. But specifically, I want to just kind of dive into the topic of Sodom and Gomorrah and the archaeological evidences and discoveries regarding that city and what actually happened. You know, it's impressive to me that not only are these cities and places that are described in the Bible, that there's concrete, credible, reliable archaeological evidence that they existed. Well, I mean, okay, those are thousands of years ago, 2, 3, 4, 5,000, 6,000 years ago. But not only that, but that the events that are recorded in the Bible, that they actually happened according to the best evidences that are presented. So we're going to dive into this one on Sodom and Gomorrah. It's quite fascinating to me. So let's jump in and let's see what he has to say.
What about things like Sodom and Gomorrah?
Sodom and Gomorrah. That is one of the most sensational stories.
Sum it up for those
recent
who
history.
Not as aware as they should be.
Yes. Okay. I mean, so Sodom and Gomorrah, it looks like one of those mythological stories out of the Bible, right? Oh yeah, sure. You know, fire comes from heaven. Yeah, tell me another one. And I'll be honest with you, Matt, when I was growing up and, you know, reading Genesis 19 and stuff like that, it was a challenge to my faith. I'm like, okay, come on, really? You know, this really happened? Or are we supposed to understand this? Something else. But, you know, so several years ago now, maybe like 15 years ago, I was at the Society of Biblical Literature, which is being held in that year.
Pause right here. There's been a number of things discovered, even in the last 20, 25 years, of new, fresh archaeological evidences to corroborate the stuff in the Bible. So this is one of these cases, all right?
Here in San Francisco. And I was in one of these, you know, conference rooms, and I just wandered into this session because it had an intriguing title, you know, something about archaeological discoveries at Tel El Hammam in Jordan. I thought, well, I'll walk into this, you know, because a lot of these conferences at you know, the Society of Biblical Literature, like these ideologically driven, you know, post-colonial, feminist, whatever, you know, interpretation of this, that, or the other thing. So I like to go to ones that are actually about language or history or something. Somebody actually dug something up and we're talking about data, you know. So this archaeological session, I wander in. I start listening, and as I'm listening to this presentation for about 45 minutes, near the end of it, I began to realize, oh my gosh, these people presenting think that they have found the biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what they're saying in a really roundabout, really understated way. So at the end of the presentation, they stop the presentation and they open up for questions, and they describe these two city mounds that they had found on the Jordanian side of the Jordan River, and in this destruction layer and so on. And so I raised my hand immediately and I said, well, did you find any arrowheads? The reason I asked that, Matt, is when you have a destruction layer of an ancient city, if you find arrowheads in the destruction layer, it means that an army caused the destruction and they were shooting arrows at the defenders and blah, 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 blah. If you find a destruction layer and there aren't arrowheads, that means an army did not destroy the city, and then probably it was some kind of natural event, right? So I'm curious, like, what destroyed these two cities that you guys think are Sodom and Gomorrah? And so the researcher starts to get very bashful when I ask this question. He says, well, I didn't really want to go there, but all I want to say while we're recording this session is that it was a heat event. And there's like 20 other people in the room, and we're like looking at each other like, a heat event? Like, is that like a wardrobe malfunction? Like, what is a heat event? You know, like, okay. And then he stopped the recording, and like the official session was over, you know, and so it was like off camera at this point. So all of us in the room like mobbed the guy at the front, like, okay, you know, tell us what's going on.
A heat event. Okay, this is interesting, right? So he's saying, and he's going to elaborate, that something of great significant heat destroyed this city, and Sodom, which they believe is Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay.
And so this researcher, Stephen Collins he's from a southwestern university in the U.S. here, he says, okay, so we get down to this destruction layer of this city that we're beginning to think is Sodom, and we pulled up a piece of pottery, and when I looked on one side of it, I thought, oh no, our research is ruined, because I saw that it was glazed, and glazing wasn't invented until the Ottoman period, or at least the kind of glazing that he thought he saw. And the Ottoman period is like 1000 AD. And if you're pulling that up, that means you've got contamination in your archaeological dig. You got like later artifacts down there. But then he turned the pottery over, and on the back of it, it was typical Bronze Age pottery, but it was glazed on one side and not on the other. Like, what on earth is going on? So make a long story short, he sends this away to a lab in the U.S. and for testing, and they come back and say, well, that glazing is trinitite. Okay, great. What's trinitite? Well, trinitite is that glass layer that you get when you basically set off an atomic bomb in the desert, and it melts the glass, and you get a kind of crystalline formation that's called trinitite. So this pottery was raised to over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit for a brief moment of time. Like, oh my gosh, this is what's going on. So they continue to bring up this glazed pottery, and eventually what they discover is, among other things, they also begin to find human remains. They find human skeletons that are complete up until about halfway up the backbone, and then there's just a scorch mark, and there's nothing on the top of the body. And they find the skeleton behind a wall that's about, 4 feet high. So what's going on here? Well, long story short, they find massive evidence that a huge heat blast from the sky at about 25 degrees above the horizon incinerated these twin cities on the Jordanian side of the river, just north of the Dead Sea. Yeah.
That's incredible.
And they have the artifacts to prove it.
And again, the reason it has to be from the sky?
What's that?
The reason it had to be from above
because of the angle. Like, they have these human remains that apparently were standing upright behind a wall, and everything above the wall was incinerated, and they do like the angular calculations, and they can see, oh, that blast was coming like this, so they can calculate the angle at which and the stuff when they find the stuff.
Again, this is archaeological digs. This has nothing to do with any kind of superstition or anything else. It's fascinating, isn't it? That again, the stuff that the Bible. I mean, you can't dig up everything to prove everything that ever happened in the Bible. That's not going to happen. But this is incredible, because this is one of the more fantastic stories in Scripture, if you will, right? One of those ones that are like, whoa, that is a serious thing.
Stuff in situ, and they've got a scorched side or a melted side. Again, they can triangulate where this is coming from. And so, long story short, from a natural material explanation, this looks like a meteor blast.
Okay. That's what I was about to ask. What was the naturalistic explanation?
Like in Tunguska, I think it was called Siberia back in the 1800s. There was this, massive meteor blast that flattened, several hundred square miles of taiga, of, northern Russian forest and so on. And, when a meteor comes into the atmosphere, it heats up and then explodes, and it can be like an atomic blast. But again, the timing and the location and the cities all track with what is described of Abraham and Lot in Genesis 19 and the surrounding chapters. And then the Bible talks a lot about Sodom and Gomorrah for centuries thereafter, all the way into the prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah continue to mention Sodom and Gomorrah. This stuck in the cultural memory because this was a major world historical traumatic event for us, like the two towers going down, like this major disaster where these two cities were entirely wiped out by a heat blast from the sky, by the hand of God, as it were. But no historical source records this, even though Sodom and Gomorrah were arguably the two most powerful cities in that entire region. They were at a trade route, from going from east to the west, from Egypt out to, the Far East, and everything was passing through there. So very powerful, very wealthy cities. And only the biblical record, has a historical account of this, meteorological, geological event that we can now attest that tracks with the time period and the description. And also that blast going up creates a...
We'll just stop it right there. This is just incredible to me, and say, well, okay, you can explain it away with a meteor shower. And, okay, well, my thought is, well, God could have sent the meteor shower, You know what I mean? That was the hand of God. And as he says, as he's already said and goes on to say, it's the timing of it all, right? It lines up with everything to do in Scripture, with the timing of when it was written, the era of when these things were supposedly had happened, and that's what the archaeological digs confirm. Okay, so why did God do that, right? And we know from Scripture it was because of the sin that was rampant in the city. That should be a stark warning to a lot of us, right? That Bible says that God is full of compassion, full of love, slow to anger, full of compassion. That His mercies begin new every day. And yet there is a line, and I don't want to come close to that line, where God says, "Okay, enough is enough," and He destroys that city. I mean, take that as you will. I'm not suggesting that God is ready to smite any of our cities here today, but I don't want to risk it either. So anyways, that's an interesting thing, unlike a lot of other faith groups. If you study some of I haven't studied everything there is to study, but, in years past, I've studied into Mormonism and the LDS stuff and their accounts of what happened in the Americas, thousands of years ago, and yet there's been no archaeological digs to prove any of those things. Maybe there's other faith groups that have similar issues. I don't know, but all I know is when it comes to the biblical record, time and time again, the things that are recorded in the Bible, the cities, the people, the places, stuff is unearthed all the time regarding, archaeological corroborative evidence that these people existed, these places existed, and the events actually happened. So anyways, thanks for watching. It was pretty interesting here to see this. I'd never heard this before. So again, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. All right, bye-bye.